So the first time I encountered Doom, my brother and his friend went to a computer show on the other side of town that I wasn't allowed to go to. They came back with a small black disc. We marathon gamed from, 8 p.m. until about 4 in the morning when my parents were stomping, on the second story because they could still hear the shotgun blast through the subwoofer.
We're in college. I live on the all-girls floor of my co-ed building. There was, of course, also an all-boys floor, of course, is where we all went. So the lights in the hallway had been shut off, and there's horrible noises coming out of people's rooms, punctuated by, yeah! Once in a while, and no!
Back then, in the early 90s, my friends were telling me, oh man, when you play Doom, it's so awesome that you get nauseous in that first-person shooter. I was like, oh, really? Punks. I'm playing it, I'm like,
Doom was Doom. It was bloody, it was violent, it was you mowing through demons with a shotgun and a chainsaw, for goodness sake.
It was so revolutionary that it was terrifying. It was almost going into a haunted house, I guess, on your own.
You shot a gun, something blew up into a cloud of pixelated blood, and it was just perfect cause and effect. And I couldn't stop playing it.
It's just that struggle of good and evil that somebody can, for half an hour at a time, kind of jump in and put his forehead, against the devil and just beat his ass down.
There are so many people that can harken back to that time in the college dorms or at the office after hours or whatever where they were playing Doom, and we've got a lot of permeation into the general culture.
id originally released Wolfenstein 3D.
Wolfenstein 3D was really the grandfather of the whole genre of the first-person shooter.
It was fun. It was a first-person game. You saw over the barrel of your gun. You went to these brightly colored, simple rooms. Nothing was lit. You'd open a door, a dog or a soldier would come at you, you'd shoot him, and that was your experience.
We wanted to do something more gritty. We had tossed around a number of different ideas, even things like car racing games and stuff like that. But when we sat down and started thinking about it, what we want to do is take that type of that first-person action, that adrenaline-pumping action, and take it to a new level.
Even at the title screen, I knew that this was something amazing that they had just stumbled upon. I saw Doom, it melted away, and then the demo of the first level was playing. And the hardcore music kicked in, and you saw the little skull with the glowing red eyes. It was an amazing experience.
I knew where I wanted to go with the next step in graphics, which involved getting away from these block-based worlds. We wanted to be able to have worlds that were a lot more freeform so that we could have pentagonal rooms and columns in the middle of areas and things that weren't just these 64 by 64 blocks that we had had for everything before. We added lighting for the first time so we could have dark areas and flickering lights, and we knew we could do a lot of things here that would have more of this horror, creepy atmosphere to it, that it wasn't all brightly lit, pure action on there. We could start bringing in some sense of dread or foreboding and areas that people could be scared of rather than just startled.
We're trying to set up a sense of tension in the world, of hearing sounds, hearing monsters creeping around corners.
What they did better than anybody else was the sense of urgency, and everything played into that, from the constant onslaught of enemies to that, when you'd beat a round, it would give you your point total. Which today's games don't bother with that because they figure you don't care, but what was great was Doom was always about the race to that final red panel. If you have to mow down 30 pink demons with a chainsaw, whatever you gotta do, get to that panel. And it was the ultimate adrenaline rush.
It's the same thing over and over, but it's the same thing. So it's just like, oh wow, I got through that room. I just want to see what's next. I just want to see what's next. Maybe there's a new monster. Maybe there's a new weapon. It's the classic thing that happens to a lot of people that are playing a game that's really good. You're playing it, and then you look at the clock, and you're like, it's 2 a.m.? You're like, oh, and then that dirty feeling sets in, like, okay. You feel like you need to call someone and confess, something, you just realize this thing completely got a hold of you.
It was really the game that popularized the whole first-person shooter genre.
You are that character, and there's a greater sense of threat when you're playing a game like that. And you look at it and you lose your peripheral vision, you are really immersed inside of that game.
Enemies were just flying at you. It really showed you how fast-paced and furious a first-person shooter could be. The levels were designed well. It was, just interesting, different areas. I mean, it really just pulled a whole bunch of like nascent concepts in the first-person shooter era. It just sort of pulled them all together in one game.
It's now you inside the world, and when something jumps out and startles you, you have people falling out of their chairs, dodging their head side to side as things are coming at them on the monitor.
What we call is the head dodge, so you get this and this and this as the rockets are coming at them on the screen, and you get the character empathy that is literally unparalleled in any other form of game.
The worst experience on the first level is walking through a door. There's a winding pathway and green ooze on either side, and in the corner of the room you just hear the imp creature. You can look up and you can see him a little bit, but you just hear him with this awful groaning noise, and you don't know exactly where it's coming from. You see him, and by the time you see him, there's a fireball in your face.
Doom was so irreverent and underground that it was almost like you're doing something that you weren't supposed to get caught doing when you were playing Doom. It was no apologies. There was no sort of content censorship.
It was like the first time you really saw a game, I was like, wow. I mean, I think it was a seminal event. It felt adult. It really sort of made people wake up, and people who were bankers, people who were lawyers, were suddenly playing a video game. And that was such a massive shift, and it's really sort of changed the way that the game industry saw itself, and they saw this whole new market. It wasn't just colorful stuff for young kids.
There was a key moment that I can remember during the development where the game was being worked on, someone was playing it, and I noticed that the janitor that comes in and picks up the trash had just been sitting there staring at the screen for a very long time watching it. And that was one of the points where we really knew that we had crossed the threshold where people that didn't classify themselves as gamers could look at this and be drawn into the world.
The thing about Doom is that Doom hit at the right time. The internet was still, in a lot of ways, in its infancy. People weren't sure exactly how to distribute games and software and this, that, the other. And id really built a following for this. They said, we're going to release this game. It's going to be amazing. They put up servers for it. They said, everybody get ready, because Doom's coming.
I think they popularized this concept of they knew that their games were the best out there, so they were going to give you a little sample, and then you would give them money and then get the rest. And they had an install base of millions on these sample levels.
There was apparently a study Microsoft had done at one point that said there were more copies of Doom installed than Windows in the early days. And this was when we had our shareware versions that people could pretty much freely distribute. And while we sold maybe 2 million copies or something of the early commercial Doom versions on there, there were many tens of millions of copies of the shareware version that had been out there and played.
I don't think that there was any doubt that Doom was going to be a huge success for the company, but I don't think that anybody really grasped the magnitude that it would have on the industry.
I remember seeing a post on Carmack's blog or on a news website that said they sat down at a table and said, well, what are we doing next? Someone threw out, how about Doom 3? And the group kind of nervously laughed or whatever, and then that's when they looked at each other and said, okay, it's time.
Doom 3, as far as the decision to do, was somewhat controversial inside the company. Me personally, I was a little bit worried about tackling Doom 3 because it's such a big responsibility. There's so many people that are just major fans of it.
Working on the new Doom title was definitely stressful because the whole world had an idea of what they wanted Doom to be, the new Doom game.
When we embarked on the project, we really knew that we were going to be changing what people were going to expect to see and experience in a video game. And there was an